And we're back. Welcome back to the Luke Deckard Show. I'm your host, Luke Deckard, and with me, I have Tony Kent, author, crime writer Tony Kent. How's it going, Tony?
It's going very well. You just caught me as you came in. I just noticed while the intro thing was playing that you tweeted this is on in half an hour, so I thought I'd better retweet it
Oh, no worries, no worries.
seconds before we came on. But
It's okay.
apart from being hopelessly disorganized, things are
Well,
going really well.
it's absolutely fine because I hit the intro, and then I hit go live, but then there was a second thing asking me to go live, so that's why the intro played twice.
I did wonder that. It was on the second one that I thought I might as well just do this.
Because I was sitting there looking at the live screen. I'm like, wait, why isn't it? It's not coming on. I was like, oh, it's because there's a secondary thing asking me to go live. But yeah, so Tony, it's really cool to have you here tonight to talk about your top six,
Thanks
six
for asking me.
books and films. It's my pleasure. So let's dive in. But first, let's talk a little bit about yourself, right? So tell the listeners a little about who you are.
I'm Tony Kent, which is a fake name. It's a writing name. My actual name is Tony Wyatt. The reason that I have Tony Kent, apart from an obsession with Superman that we'll come back to later, is I am by day a criminal barrister. And I have over the past 21 years been involved in quite a lot of very high profile cases, sort of the stuff that kind of gets onto the front pages of the newspapers. So we decided at the beginning of my writing career, my publishers and I decided that we would be Googling against ourselves effectively. Anybody Googling Tony Kent would be getting Tony Kent the barrister rather than Tony Kent, Tony Wyatt, sorry, would be getting Tony Wyatt the barrister rather than Tony Wyatt the lawyer. So we just, the author, pardon me. So we decided the sensible thing to do was to have a new name. Also, Wyatt is spelled W-Y-A-T-T. And in an alphabetized book system, that would be pretty rubbish. That would mean I'd be down by your feet the entire time. So that I can't guarantee where the middle letters will be. You can't guarantee where K will be, or you can't guarantee where M, but you know where W-Y will be, and it will be down by your feet. So we thought for those two reasons, we better have a new name, better have a different name, and we opted for Tony Kent. I kind of lied to my publishers about why. I told them, well, I've done the maths, and actually, if you take away Q and you take away X and you take away all the things that surnames don't begin with, K is right in the middle. And the reality is actually, it was my only chance to be anything associated to Superman by having Kent. So it was a complete and utter lie. They know it was a lie now. I think they knew it was a lie at the time. But yeah, so that's me, Tony Kent. I am a criminal barrister and a thriller writer.
I love that.
I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to put first.
I absolutely love it. I think it's really funny. There's similar story with my name. Mine is a pen name as well, but the surname is I chose. I'm a big fan of Blade Runner, so I chose Deckard from Blade Runner. That's hilarious that you've done kind of a similar thing. I'm glad I'm not the only one who does like cheesy stuff like that. So I like that. Okay, so
the downside, of course, is the justification, which was if you Google Tony Wyatt, you'll get Tony Wyatt the barrister. Is we were totally wrong, because now if you Google Tony Wyatt, pardon me, you still get Tony Kent. Annoyingly, that's the first thing that comes up. So my 20 years of doing what I thought were really important, newsworthy cases are now not important at all because I've written a couple of books. So.
Oh, that's quite funny. I mean, my whole justification for it was I have some other books out there under my original name that I was like I put some distance with, and I thought, okay, we'll start over with a new name, and we'll go from there. So it will probably be the same thing in the future for me as well. Who knows? So your journey as a writer, I'm kind of interested in that. What came first? Was it barrister or was it writer?
Oh, barrister, but by a mile. I always, from the age of about 14, I wanted to be a barrister.
Oh, wow.
And I come from a background where university wasn't really the thing that you aim for. I come from a family of builders. Everyone in the family is a builder. I genuinely was pushing my first tarmac wheelbarrow when I was 12 years old. And it's I was doing my first roof with my dad at 13. And that's just what we did as kids. You grew up and you went to work with dad. to learn the family trade. And that's what you do. And all of my brothers are in the family trade. Well, with the exception of one, who is the eldest brother, who just has basically spent his entire life until recent years in and out of prison, getting himself in trouble. And he's the reason that I became a barrister, because when I was 14 years old, having spent all this time just building and tarmacking and roofing, my brother was on trial in Aylesbury Crown Court. And we're not stupid, we're not naive. We know what my brother is. We certainly knew what he was. But on this occasion, on this single occasion, he was not guilty. He had not done it. We knew this for a fact because the police had lied. And one of the things they'd lied about was they claimed to have found things in my mum and dad's house that he'd allegedly stashed there, which just wasn't true. And we knew it wasn't true for two reasons. Number one, he was terrified of my mum. He would never have dared do it. And number two, they were there when the police raided the house. They knew that the police didn't get anything. And yet they still claimed they had. There was a particular very bent copper in Uxbridge where I grew up at the time. I'm not sure, probably libelous to say his name. I'm not sure if he's ever been caught.
Yeah, we'll leave him out of this for now.
So we'll leave that out. As a lawyer, I'm going to take the
allegedly
the sensible view. But anyway, he was. There's no question about that. He was definitely fitted up.
Yeah.
And so on this one occasion, this only occasion, we went to court to support him. Every other time you're on your own, you shouldn't have done it.
Right.
But on this occasion, we went to court to support him. And the barrister who was representing him, a man called Selwyn Shapiro, who I got to know later in life as a colleague. Selwyn Shapiro, he just tore the police to pieces. And of course he did, because they were lying. And I now realize Selwyn was excellent. Don't take this in the wrong way. But I now look back and I think, how much we would all love to have that material to work with. Because it's not often that it's that blatant that they're telling these lies. But anyway, I didn't know that at the age of 14. All I saw was this man just destroying these police officers who I knew had lied. And I'll be honest with you, I knew they'd upset my mum. And that was really the thing. The fact that she was so upset by things was, and then seeing this guy come to her aid effectively, it was almost a bit superhero-ish, if we can put it that way. And he was wearing a cape. And, and I watched this at 14 and just thought, that's what I want to do. That's the job for me. So from 14, I wanted to be a barrister. I never thought I would be one because our understanding, I grew up on a council estate and then, worked for my fat dad's building. It just wasn't something, but to say you're going to be a barrister, you may as well say you're going to be an astronaut, or you may as well say you're going to be the Pope. And actually, Irish Catholic family, they probably would have taken the Pope first. But, but the upshot was my mum did say, look, that's a great thing to aim for, and that'd be wonderful, but don't tell anyone because they'll laugh at you. So I did spend the next few years wanting to do that, but thinking I couldn't do that. And it was only when I got to 18 and passed my A-levels, which a whole other story, but I decided by this point to join the army, and my mum wouldn't sign me off. So I had to wait till I was 18. And so I did my A-levels just to kill time. And I ended up doing very well in my A-levels. And then my mum said, maybe you should think about this barrister thing. And I ended so I hadn't applied to university. So on the day I got my results, I had to go through clearing, having never actually applied in the first place, and ended up in Dundee University just on a whim. And the whim was based upon two things. I'd read their prospectus, and it said they had a boxing club, which I was obsessed with boxing, and so that was a big thing. I later found out that A, their boxing club was rubbish, and B, every university has a boxing club, but the rest of them just didn't put it in their prospectus. And B, the other reason that I went was it was almost a 2-to-1 male to female ratio. So working out the most important part of university, I went on that and went up to Dundee. So the answer in a very long-winded, rambling, tangent-filled way is it was barrister first.
Fascinating. No, I like that though. So then what was it? When did writing you creatively come into your life then? When did you decide, I'm gonna write a book?
Well, I always enjoyed writing things, fiction, but mainly I was I loved comics, but I couldn't draw, so that was never a question. I can't even draw a stick man, so I couldn't. It was out the question. So I kind of just used to write treatments and scripts of my own devising for films and TV shows. I'd come up with an idea for a TV show or for a film, And I'd write sort of a script that I had no idea what I was doing. And now I look at things like Final Draft, and I look at how you actually write scripts, and God knows what I was playing at. But that's what I thought I was doing. And I didn't really understand that books of this sort existed, because I was reading what they told me to read in school. They were saying you read the classics. I was reading Wuthering Heights and the like, and Jane Austen and all this. And I fully accept, and this is not a criticism of them, I know they're classics. I realise why they're classics. I would not read one of those books if you paid me. They are boring, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry that offends anyone. I know people have different views, but I'm just saying, my view, boring. So for me, books were the things I had to read for school. And everything. And so when I was reading, I used to read loads, but mainly factual stuff. I'd read military history and ancient history and mythology and things like that. And that fascinated me. But then we'll come on to this later, because when we were doing the books, my mum gave me a book called The Winner by David Bardacci. And long story short, because we're going to touch on this later, I read that and then just thought, oh my God, these books, this you can write books like this. Books like this exist.
Right.
And so from that point onwards, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write as well, because I'd always really wanted to write something. But suddenly I'd realized that the thing I could write could be great, could be a book.
Yeah. And
I then spent, I was at university. I was just not really thinking about anything like this. And then I was in a bar one night, and this goes back to my older brother. I was talking to somebody in a bar who I'd been to school with, and he made the comment to me. He said, "So you're going to be a barrister?" I just really, because I was about to begin my apprenticeship stage, my pupillage stage. So you're going to be a barrister? Oh, that's amazing. I mean, well done you. I mean, imagine that, you being a barrister when you come from a family of villains. I come from a family of builders with one peck of teeth in it. But that's the way people sometimes see the world, through their weird coloured spectacles.
Yeah.
And I was offended for a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, what a really good idea, though. Imagine a criminal barrister who came from a family of villains. And and then he gets himself in a situation where he's got to go back to them. And that became Killer Intent. And that was the beginning of Killer Intent, my first book. And I started writing that the next day. I wrote the first 3 chapters. And I was 21. I then went off and began my pupillage, which is, again, barrister's apprenticeship, lasts a year. And I thought at the time, well, I'll just be a barrister and a writer. and having written those 3 chapters, I then did not write anything again for 10 years. Because the career to be a successful barrister, and I was lucky to be in a very good chambers. To be a successful barrister, it's just completely all encompassing. You don't get to do anything else. The idea I'll be a barrister and a something is just absurd. And any criminal barrister watching this would know that. So I had the want to write began with The Winner when I was about 17 years old. The act of writing began when I was 21 with 3 chapters, but then I really started writing when I was 32.
Wow. Yeah. So I love that. I like this idea that that kind of nugget for your series came from that kind of flippant comment that was made. That's quite fun. So okay, so you that comment has been said. You go the next day and you write your first 3 chapters. Then you wait 10 years to kick off the rest of the book. By that point, how do you? What was it like going back to those original chapters? And how did you develop the series from that point onwards?
The first few chapters were totally shit. I mean, they are basically what they are now, but written by a 21-year-old who didn't know how to write. And there are many who would say that they're probably now written by a 33-year-old who didn't know how to write. But in any event, they were very different. But they were very different, but they were very much the same. Nothing changes. The same characters are all there. The same things happen. It's just written differently and hopefully written better.
Yeah.
In terms of developing the series, the first thing I did was just finish the book.
Yeah.
I spent time on finishing the book, and then I spent a number of years just rewriting it. I'd leave it for 6 months, I'd rewrite it. I'd leave it for 6 months, I'd rewrite it. And I spent some time sending it around, as you do, but nowhere near as much as most people do, because I just didn't have the time. I just did not have the time to do it.
Yeah.
So I didn't have, I had plenty of rejection in the sense of everyone rejected it, but everyone was only about 4 different people, to be honest.
Right.
Because it's just all I really got around to. I only
Yeah.
really got around to taking it seriously in terms of trying to get published when I was 39. Because my wife read it and said, "This is good. You should do something with this. This is about 38 actually." She read it and said, "You should really try and do something with this actually." And she's much more pushy than me in life, and a much better salesperson, whether she's selling herself or her perfume or me. And so I listened to her and sort of went along with what she was saying, and we pushed and pushed, and we got somewhere. Yeah. But in terms of developing the series, a lot of people when they read the first couple of books regard my books as being the Michael Devlin series, who is the barrister with the dodgy past. Right. And it really isn't. It was never intended to be that. I actually was never going to write a second book that featured Michael Devlin. I always felt my series was about Joe Dempsey, who is the intelligence agent. Yes. And for me, what I'm writing, and I still feel this way, what I'm writing is James Bond for the 21st century. I'm writing a new James Bond in my mind. He's obviously not James Bond, but my version of that. I'm writing my version of Jack Reacher, my version of James Bond, my version of Jason Bourne. Yeah, closest to Bond because of what he does, but that's what I'm writing. And that was always my idea. That was what I was going to do. And one of the main reasons for that was because I am a criminal barrister. I know that these things don't happen. I know how absurd it is for Michael to get himself into these situations once, let alone book after book after book. And there's only so much of that I know I could write because of that reason. Whereas Joe Dempsey, he works for the UN. He's the International Security Bureau at the UN. Yeah. He can go anywhere. He can do anything. And actually, he should be involved in all the biggest things. Yeah. So he's the one with the great big canvas. However, I've got a very close friend of mine who used to work for Random House and has worked in all different parts of the industry. Massive book snob. Actually regards what I write as a load of shit because it's not cerebral enough at all for him. Oh God! He started to admit he quite enjoys it, but at the same time, as far as he's concerned, if you're not writing Proust, you may as well not be writing. But in any event, he still helped me. He was kind enough to help me. And what he said to me at the time was, after I'd written the first one, he said, "Well, write the next one about the barrister." He said, "I hadn't really realised that Killer Intent was Michael's story, because he and Joe Dempsey are in it 50-50." But actually, looking back on it, it's clearly Michael's story because it's Michael who, you see Joe doing his job, whereas Michael is the one who is it's actually invested in his private life, and you're meeting his family, and you're learning about him, where you're just seeing Joe Dempsey be impressive and all right, it's a bit of a vendetta, but at the same time, he's doing his job. Yeah, and so that does make it Michael's story. I realise that now, and I didn't realise it then, but this chap did. His name is Neil, and he said, "Look, there's no British John Grisham. You're a barrister. Write about the barrister. Write another one. He's a really interesting character." This is slightly before Steve Kavanagh turned up and actually became this new British John Grisham. So it was good advice when I started the book. It wasn't such great advice when I ended the book. But that made me write Mark for Death, which is book 2, which was the one that the Richard and Julie Book Club picked up. Right. And that's a purely Michael Devlin book. So that's kind of how the series developed, was the advice of a mate of mine that took me off down the Michael Devlin route for a second book. And then my own belief that actually it's Joe Dempsey's series really that brought me back with Power Play, and then which features Michael, and then No Way to Die, which doesn't feature Michael at all, which is my current book, most recent book. And then the one I'm writing now, which is tentatively called Trust No One, although I'm pretty confident they're going to change that, which I'm literally in the course of structurally editing today. Right. And that again is another Michael and Joe book. But then the book after that will be a Joe book, a Dempsey book. So Michael's still there. Yeah. They share a universe, and they will always share a universe. And I do have a couple of ideas for Michael only books moving forward. Yeah. But primarily it's a Joe Dempsey universe.
Oh, fascinating. So you're mentioning this, you kind of, this is your sort of James Bond, your Jack Reacher, all that kind of stuff. When you said the James Bond comment, it did. I thought about your most recent one, the No Way to Die, and is it a coincidence that the new Bond movie, No Time
No
to
Time
Die?
to Die. I think it's subconscious rather than a coincidence. No Time to Die was supposed to come out several years ago, wasn't it? And there was a
Yes.
lot of publicity for it.
Very true, yes.
And then the pandemic happened, so it went into abeyance.
Yeah.
Then I finished No Way to Die. We had a bit of a thrash around for a good name, and we came up with No Way to Die. And I'm fairly confident that we all subconsciously did No Time to Die, but by that point we'd all forgotten. By that time it was gone. And then by the time we did the cover design and we were all ready to go, they were suddenly releasing the Bond again, and it was No Time to Die. And we had a momentary panic. We did have a moment of, oh no, and then I'll be honest, I said, well, come on. I mean, what better advertising is there? Let's just screw it. Let's jump on it. Why worry? It's not the same title.
No.
I have called the book No Time to Die in several very big interviews then.
I'm not surprised. Even I was about to slip and do that a second ago. I was like, wait, I need to slow down and think about what I'm saying. But yeah, no, I remember that coming out kind of roughly the same time and thinking, oh, I wonder if that was a nice little, like, kind of, it's close but different. And but I can see how that could easily, okay, this book is kind of like James Bond as well. I liked it.
We decided to run with it for exactly that reason. It wasn't intentional to get there, but that was the rationale for not changing it.
Yes, and between the two, No Way to Die or No Time to Die, there's one that's definitely better than the other, and that would be your book.
I'm grateful. I'm very grateful you say that, because I agree. Yeah. Not because I'm arrogant about my book, but because I think the film's rubbish.
Oh my god! We watched it. I guess did it come out on streaming first? I can't remember. Anyway, we watched it at home. I didn't watch it in the cinema, and I was floored by how terrible. It's not a Bond movie, and Bond is he's such a damp squib the whole time. Like I'm like, I want to see Bond being
like a passenger in his own movie.
Say again. Passenger, yes.
He's like a passenger in his own movie. I don't understand the love for Daniel Craig. He's got all this massive residual love as Bond based on one movie, based on Casino Royale. Casino Royale is the best first Bond movie of any Bond actor. Hands down. I'll argue that with anyone.
Yeah.
He's great at it as a proto Bond, as a Bond who's not quite yet Bond.
Yeah.
And it's a great movie. And I would argue with anyone that it's the best first Bond movie of any actor. After that, he didn't make a single good Bond movie. He made Skyfall is a good movie. It's a good action movie. It's not a Bond movie. Quantum of Solace is terrible by any standards of any movie ever made. As is Spectre. It's absolutely shit.
Spectre was sad, yeah.
And No Time to Die is again, it's a very average movie that's not a Bond movie.
Yes.
And so I just don't get the love for him, because I mean, Timothy Dalton made one Bond movie and one non-Bond movie, but he was at least Bond in both of them. And he did look like he wanted to be there. Whereas Daniel Craig's like, well, I'm here because I got a big check, and that's it. But I'm better than this.
It is complicated with Daniel Craig. I agree. I like two of his movies. I like Casino and I like Skyfall.
Yeah.
The others I could leave. There was an interesting interview that came out around the time that No Time to Die premiered, where it was on the Bond YouTube channel, I believe. It's audio only. It's with Daniel Craig, Barbara Broccoli, and the other producer guy, and they basically go through Craig's tenure. And there is a couple of interesting comments that they make, and they say that Sam Mendes didn't want to do the sequel. He didn't want to do Spectre. And Daniel Craig basically said, hey, come on, as a favor to me, do it, please.
Yeah.
And I think you can feel him not interested in that movie, because it's
no investment.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating that you can kind of, I always wondered why it was such an interesting dip from Skyfall, that I was like, I'm surprised it's the same guy doing the sequel. And it's like, not even like even remotely up to the same kind of par as Skyfall. But I'm curious though, explain what you mean by Skyfall not being a Bond movie.
Well, I think a Bond movie's got certain things that it needs to be a Bond movie.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to Goldfinger. Dr. No, to a lesser extent. From Russia with Love probably isn't a Bond movie in the classic sense now, but it was okay because it was before you'd set the template.
Yeah.
It's also the best Bond movie. in my
I love
opinion.
that movie. It is my favorite.
It's just the best Bond movie, hands down.
Yeah.
But it's also, again, I say that it's not actually really a Bond movie, but when you look at it, it's got a couple of gadgets and the rest of it's not really there.
Yeah.
Whereas Skyfall, Skyfall's not a Bond movie. Skyfall is basically the Dark Knight. Yeah, it's even down to Silver getting himself captured so that he can then actually execute his plan. It's not it's a very good action movie. It's a great 2020s or 20-teens action movie in the vein of all of them. It's not Bond.
That's true.
He's not Bond. Mason Cross is very interesting on this point. Mason Cross believes that, or don't believe, but he said, as far as he's concerned, Daniel Craig is playing either 006 or 008. The guy that actually finds the whole thing a bit difficult, who must be looking at 007 doing things alongside him, just like so effortlessly. These are so easy. Right. You can just imagine Daniel Craig and then Pierce Brosnan, who I'm not a fan of his films, don't get me wrong, but still, it's that's Bond, and that's not Bond. That's a thug. Yeah, he's a suave killer. Yeah, and he's a rough house thug.
Yes,
and it's just not Bond.
Yeah, Craig doesn't have the suaveness that Connery, Dalton had, and Brosnan. I can't stand Roger Moore. For me, he's the one I can't watch any of his movies. I can at least watch a couple of Craig's, but I can't watch any. I
love Roger Moore. I absolutely love Roger Moore. I can't stand his Bond.
Yes, you could completely agree. Yes,
he was a great man. He's probably the nicest man out of all of them.
Yeah,
he was certainly the least serious as an actor. He didn't take himself seriously at all.
Yes,
but as Bond, he was an awful Bond.
Yes. Anyway, this isn't a James Bond chat, but
it's not. Sorry. We'll do that another time.
But
I think we have.
Yeah, we could go deeper for sure. Okay, so let's actually get into your top 6.
Okay.
But let's kind of connect Bond into this. So someone in the chat, Biffer, asked us a question, and the question is, he says he has a negative question. It is why do 90% of modern movies stink? And I think coming off of talking about Spectre and No Time to Die, it seems like a fitting question to maybe ask now.
I think because we are, and this is going to sound strange after somebody moaning about why Skyfall doesn't hit the Bond template. And it may sound a bit hypocritical, but there we are. I'm going to be a hypocrite. I think it's because we have a template. I think they're spending so much money now to make films. Budgets have gone insane. And it's not in line with inflation. Budgets have gone insane.
Yeah.
And because of that, they have their guarantee that they're going to get their money back, and they can't take a risk. Nobody is willing to take a risk. The reality is they can take a risk. Avatar was a risk, and look what happened. I guess it wasn't a risk because you had James Cameron, so that makes it less of a risk. But as a concept, apart from the involvement of Cameron, it's a risk.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest movie ever made. But generally, they won't take a risk. So everything's a template now, isn't it? Everything, even down to look at Knives Out and The Onion, or whatever it's called, the
Glass
sequel.
Onion, yeah.
Glass Onion. That's a template. I mean, everyone keeps talking about how original that is. It's just Agatha Christie done not quite so well. I mean, it's ridiculous to be suggesting that this is he's invented this new. No, he hasn't.
I know.
He's just copied Agatha Christie, and so that's a template. But it's less common these days. So we're loving it because it's something. So oh my god, give me some originality, and it's almost as if that's the originality we're being given, but it's not actually original. There is real originality out there, but it's not getting made. Look at Duncan Jones stuff. Look at Moon. I mean, there's no template for that. I mean, there's no template for Moon. And have we had something like that in the last few years? Or Districts? Was it District 19 or
District 9? District 9.
District 9. Sorry, that was around the same time. Those two things, completely original. No one's making stuff like that now. Yeah. And they had differing levels of success financially, but critically massive.
Yeah,
no one's making that now.
Yeah,
and Netflix was the opportunity.
Yeah,
and I think they just seem to have shot their bolt so completely on The Irishman that they just now make shit, and they just make tentpole rubbish as well.
Yeah,
it's just almost as if it's like, well, what is going to guarantee that we're going to get enough people just to come along and watch it because it'll do? I watched Black Adam last night. Oh my god! I mean, that's been in development for 16 years.
Yeah.
How do you get something that you develop for 16 years be that bereft of ideas?
Yeah.
It was just awful. Every single film, half of all superhero films seem to end these days with an army of the undead. Even Thor Ragnarok ended with an army of the undead, and that was a great film because in many other ways they made that really work. But it's just it's not lack of imagination. Imagination is there, although less and less. I believe there's just no one willing to take a risk anymore. It's got to be. Did that work before? Do it again.
Well, it's interesting because I'm thinking about Top Gun Maverick, in which that is using the Top Gun formula, but it's a great film. So is it that individuals like Ryan Johnson who are doing Knives Out and Glass Onion is it that these templates are just in the wrong hands, and that's why it's like, well, these formulas are they're formulas that work for a reason, but if it's in the wrong hands, then it's only going to be, half as good, and that's the problem. Is that
maybe in weaker hands is the problem? Maybe the hands don't have the strength or the influence.
Yeah,
I just think it's studios. Studios are not allowing, because you're right. I mean, the Maverick's a great example. This can work.
Yeah,
but I mean, it takes something, doesn't it, to make a film a Maverick and not a Force Awakens, because they're basically the same. Yes. They've both taken their original film.
Yep.
They've taken them forward in time. They've added new people, got the old ones back, and they've basically remade the film.
Yeah.
Except Maverick did it in a way that was just exceptional.
Yes.
And The Force Awakens did it in a way that made you sit there thinking, I've just watched a bad version of Star Wars. And,
exactly.
And I think, I think that's it. And I actually think there's an element of, and when we go back to the strength side of things, there's no forced bullshit in Maverick. There's no, right, we have to have a Mary Sue character. Yeah. There's no, it's just like, we've taken it and we've remade it, and we've remade it in a way that we think you'll like.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we've got to satisfy this part of the audience, so let's stick that person in there. Got to satisfy that part of the audience, so we're going to stick this person in there. Yeah. It's not, it was remaking without trying to hit tick every box and hit every category.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more interested in just telling Maverick's story and where he is now and how he's reacting to these new kids, plus Goose's son, being in the picture. And it was tremendous. They knocked it out of the park. And as you're saying, it literally is the same thing that Force Awakens was, but it just managed to, you could just feel that there was heart and soul behind it, whereas Disney is soulless. And I feel that's why most of their films have no soul. As much as they push it, like, but yeah. So your first film out of your top 6, we're gonna go with Roadhouse, the Patrick Swayze action movie, the bouncer action film.
He's cooler.
He's a cooler. From 1980, was it 9?
God knows.
Something along those lines. How in the world did Roadhouse make it to your, you have 3 films to pick. How did Bouncer, now I'm going to keep calling it Bouncer.
Roadhouse.
How did
Bouncer House?
Bouncer House. How did Roadhouse make it to your top?
Roadhouse, we cleared this up when we did the pre-interview stuff, didn't we? This isn't me saying that these are the greatest films ever made. It's about them being your favorite films.
Exactly.
I think there's a very, very big difference in saying the best film and your favorite film. The best film ever made is The Godfather 1 and 2. It's just no argument, and I will have that out with anyone. They are just the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah.
And they actually are in my top 10 favorite films. But once you're at the very top of it, Roadhouse is the greatest terrible film ever made.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like somebody just took the worst possible script and said, what if we actually hire some proper talent, some proper people, and make this well. and
Yeah.
it would be like, let's have a competition to find the worst possible idea and the
Yes.
worst possible script and actually do it well. And
Yes.
Roadhouse is the result of that. Is the product. It's just the most enjoyable film I think
Yeah.
there is. And it's ridiculous. Every single part of it is utterly ridiculous. I mean, it's just it'd be hard to find a science fiction film that's less real than Roadhouse, and yet it's just so bloody good. It's just so good. Everything about it is absurd and absurdly great.
Yes. It reminded me of, I don't know if you ever watch the other YouTube channel called Red Letter Media.
No, I'm not.
If you do, you'd like them, I think, probably. They're really funny. They do a couple of different shows, and one is like a general film review, but they also do something called Best of the Worst, in which they will find a handful of really bad films from any decade, and they'll watch them and they'll do a deep dive discussion on them.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I have seen this. This isn't Rob Parker, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Right. Okay.
No.
I know he does something like that.
What I felt about with Roadhouse was it reminded me of a lot of the similar sort of, B movie, low budget crap movies that they tend to watch that are so bad that they're good. But as you're saying, this one has the budget. This one has genuine talent in the movie, but it is the same quality of some of those movies, because like the bar is insane. The bar is insane.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
There's a fight every 5 seconds. And it's so
and it somehow transforms halfway through the film. It suddenly becomes a different bar.
Right.
You never see any work being done. You never see any passage of time. They just turn up one night and it's really brilliant bar. It's gone from this absolute shithole that you wouldn't step foot in. But also it's like a wooden shack from the outside. And then when you go there later in the film, it's this big sort of concrete purpose-made nightclub. It's like, when did the time jump?
Where'd the concrete come from, guys? And I love the fact that like the band is behind a cage.
Yeah.
Because everyone's throwing bottles all the time, and so therefore they have this cage up so they can't get smacked. It was such a bizarre, and it's full of so many funny like one-liners. Do you have a particular one-liner from this movie that sticks with you?
Oh, do you know what? I don't. I actually don't, because there are just so many of them, and
all
the best ones come from Sam Elliott. I mean, Sam Elliott's just absolutely fantastic in this film.
Yes,
as Wade Garrett, Wade Garrett, the previous top cooler. Wade Garrett's getting old. He's still the best. It's just absurd writing, and yet he really manages to pull it off. And it's. The lines are terrible. I mean, even the good lines. Actually, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 of them now as you're asking me the question. I hadn't actually thought to do this, but as I'm thinking them, I'm about to say them. And as I'm about to say them, my brain's saying, "You have an English accent, and you are not Sam Elliott." And I'm realizing that they're going to sound fucking awful coming from me.
Give it a go.
It's just so they are so badly written and yet delivered with such. They're just talented people in this film. I mean, even Brad Wesley, the big bad guy. Brad Wesley's played by Grazia, is it Ben Grazia?
Yes.
Who was a major method actor. He was the same class as Marlon Brando, and was regarded as a peer of Marlon Brando. And he plays Brad Wesley, the local gangster in this shitty town that somehow manages to give him enough protection money from their 5 different businesses to be living in a mansion with helicopters.
It's the bit when he like has a monster truck drive through the car dealership. Really, this movie is just like macho on overdrive, and that's it. It's testosterone through the roof. Whatever bit of crazy masculine action and crazy, it just 80s. It's just so 80s. It's
I think
so
what the, the,
80s.
the thing about it though is we all watch these things as kids. I mean,
Yeah.
I was born in '78, so I was
Mm.
exactly the right age coming through the '80s to
Yeah.
love these movies. I loved Van Damme films. I shamefully loved Steven Seagal films when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I used to eat them up. I remember doing a school book report on Absent Without Leave or Lionheart or whatever it was called. And my teacher just saying, Tony, never write anything like this again. I don't want to know. I don't know about how Van Damme got his second win. And so I grew up loving these things. But I've
Yeah.
watched them all again as a grown-up, and they are uniformly terrible, except
Yeah.
Roadhouse. Roadhouse is the only one that you can watch as a grown-up and think, yeah, no wonder I love this.
Yes. What do you think of the character of Dalton? Because he's this weirdly, he's famous for being a bouncer, being a cooler. It's like I heard someone once describe it as like a John Wick sort of situation where like
Yeah.
there's this underground network of bouncers, like because the guy stabs him, he's like, I've always wanted to go head to head with you, and it's like, why is he? How is he's a bouncer? Why is he so famous? Like, but then he's also a philosophy major.
But then, and everyone, he's really famous, but everyone's surprised that he's small. It's
Right.
the first thing you'd say about him. Yeah, this really hard small bloke.
Right. Right. It's weird. It's like, so no one's seen him, but he's super famous. Come on, guys. I did find it funny that sort of what they were trying to do with this character. They were trying to he's this super tough guy, but he's also into philosophy and he's a little bit zen, and like you can just see the meetings happening. Be like, oh my gosh, he's gonna have so many great, moments of clarity. Where he's gonna be able to say really fun things like, pain isn't painful.
Yeah, pain don't hurt.
Pain, that's it. Pain don't hurt. Does it?
What's the other one? No one. Do you ever win a fight? No one ever wins a fight. And then about half an hour later, I never lose. This is a script written by the same guy or what?
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name who wrote the script, but he must have been on some serious something.
Steroids and coke.
Yes,
definitely steroids and coke. They're the only two things I think that can do that to you in combination.
Oh man, yeah. But it is. I agree. It is a fun B movie to watch.
Yeah.
You won't be disappointed.
Best terrible film.
Yes. So that's a very good choice. I like that choice. So one of your novels that you picked is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, written in 1961. It's a satirical war novel for those who don't know. Another really interesting choice. Why Catch-22 for some of your books?
It's like nothing I've ever written. It's like nothing I could ever write. It's beyond me in every single conceivable way.
Yes.
It's one of the few things I think you can read where you can just watch genius dripping off the page.
Yeah.
It's so well written. It is a close. They say it's a hard book to film or an impossible book to film, which I agree with. I think it's probably an impossible book to really describe. So the first half of the book, you follow it almost chronologically, and you follow it mainly from the point of view of Yossarian, who's the main character. It was incredibly interesting, just incredibly interesting. And then the second half of the book, you basically go back and revisit all of the same things that you've already seen in non-chronological order.
Yeah.
From the point of view of all different characters. So I mean, it's got a bit of Pulp Fiction in it in that way.
Yeah.
In the sense of, but you've got that anchor of the first half that does let you know when these things really happen. Yeah. But it's just a picture of war. I mean, it's completely and utterly insane as a book. It's completely insane. It's a satire. It's a comedy. It's absolutely laugh out loud funny. You can genuinely, that's a cliche to say this, but you can genuinely be crying at a point in this book and then be bursting out laughing within a heartbeat of that.
Yeah.
It's just, it takes you right up and drags you right down. And in the main, it's very funny. In the main, it's very funny. In the main, it's very surreal and very war is crazy, and so is the book. But there are some really deep, dark moments as well. It's just like nothing I've ever read. I have to be honest. I mean, I go back to it every couple of years and read it again, and it just has something new in every reading. Yeah, and it's impossible really to describe it. it's one of those books where you just got to say to people, just read it. You've
Yeah.
got to read it, and don't listen to me. Don't listen to anyone else. And it's complete. What's the word? It's a complete one-off as well, because
Yeah.
Joseph Heller never wrote anything of this quality again. He
Yeah.
actually wrote a sequel called was it Not Staying Alive? Much I'll come back to me later, but a sequel much later that was just such a disappointment when I tried to read it. It was because I was expecting, this is going to be. It was 30 or 40 years later. I think it's going to be this amazing follow-on, and it was
Closing
just
time.
awful. Closing time. That's it. Closing time. All about the same characters, when the ones that have survived when they're very old.
Yes.
But I mean, the whole idea of war is crazy. Of course it is, but I don't think anything has ever been able to demonstrate it like this.
Yeah. What do you think it is about Catch-22 that it's made it a classic?
I think everything I just said, really. It's just, you can't put it down. I mean, you just can't put it down. You start reading it. I have to be careful when I read it, because if I start reading it, then until I've finished, I won't do much else. And it's a big old book. I mean, it's very, very small print, and that doesn't look that big. But when you see how tiny the print is, that's massive.
Yes.
And it's just, again, I think it's a classic because in the way that I've described the others, I can see why Jane Austen is classic. I can see why Wuthering Heights is classic. I can see.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other ones. I mean, I quite like Charles Dickens, so I shouldn't really say Charles Dickens, but I can see George Eliot. I can see why you can see why they're classics.
Yes.
And you can see why this is a classic. It drips off the page. Except, unlike those, I find this fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's just so. I mean, it's trying to keep up with the way your mind is constantly engaged if you're reading this book. If you're reading that book, you're not off for a moment. You can find with books, and I include mine in this. You can find with most ordinary books that you might suddenly realize that you've turned off a page or two. But you're still fine. You still keep up with it. You might have missed something, but you're all right. You can carry on. You can't do that. You cannot do that with Catch-22. Your mind cannot turn off, and it doesn't want to turn off, and it won't turn off.
Yeah,
it's just laser focused on this insanity that's happening. I mean, and also, I mean, the characters. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a book that has the same level of incredible characterization of so many characters. I mean, who have you got? You've got Milo. Is it what's his name? Milo something or other.
Yes.
Who is the Milo's the quartermaster, and he's put in charge of he's always at the beginning of the book trying to get in charge of the store. And then when he's finally put in charge of the store and in charge of the canteen, he then just turns it into an international business. And it ends up that he's renting German planes and bombing his own airfields.
Yes.
Because he wants to create demand for oranges. And I mean, it just goes from being this quartermaster over the course of this book to being basically Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And you got
yes.
And the character Major, whose name is. His surname is Major, and his father has called him Major. And because of that, it actually says an algorithm with a sense of humor appointed him Major, just to make it. And so he's never been any other rank. And so he's running things just because his father decided to christen him Major. And so he spends the entire book hiding from people because he doesn't want to make any decisions. So the rule of his office is you can only go in and see him when he's not there.
Yeah.
And I mean, just all of this just complete craziness that's going on in this little detachment of the American Air Force.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating, I think thematically it explores some really interesting stuff, and I think the one of those is something you just mentioned with Milo and the kind of the bombing, you're bombing your own stuff in order to sort of generating violence for profit. It's very very Ferengi. If anyone gets the Star Trek reference, but it's fascinating. I think, as you're saying, like there is a lot of wit, but then there is a lot of hard hitting stuff like that makes you stop and think about war and what is really going on in war. And there's an old Dashiell Hammett short story that kind of hits on a similar vein of this, where it's a couple of vets are struggling after World War One. They go after a guy who basically just profited off of the war, and it's one of those things where it's like we all sort of know that exists, but I think trying to live through that, and then I don't know, and then coming out of it and seeing all this profit, and then and just seeing the craziness of like, I was sitting here risking my life, and you're doing this so that you can just get richer, like, you fucker.
Yeah.
So I like that. The back and forth in this book is, I think, quite fascinating. So I totally get why this is this is on there. Is there anything? Is there a specific kind of moment or specific theme for you that stands out the most?
I think the thing that stands out the most is I think Michaela, isn't it? Michaela, who is raped and murdered by one of the men. And you've followed these men now through this lengthy book, and it's towards the end actually that you first see it happen. And you're following this book and you're liking these men. They're not necessarily your heroes, because no one's doing anything particularly heroic, but they're just normal men in an abnormal situation. Okay, it's all a bit crazy, a little bit mad. The way they act is all a bit heightened, but you like them. They're just the guys, and you like them, and you follow them, and they're your mates almost, and you're reading it. And then one of them goes and does this horrible, disgusting, terrible thing to this woman, and then suddenly you're realizing how desensitized everyone's become to just the darkest, most horrific things. And I think that probably brings home the horror of war element of the book more than anything else. Just this sort of moment where you've gone from laughing, joking, great, how much fun, they're off in Rome having loads of fun, and then suddenly it's just, oh my God. And it can knock you for six.
Yeah, it makes sense as to why, like, kind of one of the questions throughout is with so much like hell going on, like the question of how can there be a God when there's all this stuff going on. It's a fascinating book. If for anyone listening, if you've not read it, go read it. Did you enjoy, or did you watch it all? There was a series a couple of years ago.
The George Clooney one.
Yes. Did you watch it?
I got through 2 episodes. You can't make this film. You might get away with making this book as a film. You will not get away with making it as a series. A series requires structure. A film, we just spoke about Pulp Fiction. You can get away with it in a film. A series requires structure. No, it just didn't work. Didn't work at all.
I'm not surprised. I remember it being advertised, but then I did not. I remembered no sort of excitement once it was out. I
was really excited to watch it. End of the first episode, I thought I'll give it one more, and then that was that.
Nope, done.
The madness wasn't there. The madness just wasn't there at all.
Yes, I remember. I think the trailer, I think, if I remember right, felt like there was going to be madness.
Yeah,
if I remember the trailer right. But like I said, I never watched it, so yeah. But I'll take your word for it. It didn't look like anything. It didn't strike me that I would actually enjoy it if I watched it. I thought this is one of those things where trailer's probably better than the actual thing, and that sounds like that's exactly what it was. So your the next that you have is another film, which is a great film, Gladiator, Ridley Scott's 2000 Roman epic, Gladiator. What was it about? Why did you choose Gladiator?
Gladiator, I think, is the films that aren't of my childhood. I was 20 when I watched Gladiator, I believe, 2021. The films that aren't of my childhood, Gladiator sticks out more than any of them. Various personal reasons to that. I actually worked on it when it was being made.
Yep.
Had no idea the level of what I was working on at the time. I was actually at university. I was studying for my resits, and I'd messed. Basically, I boxed at university. I used to run the boxing team, And I only ever had one resit at university, and that resit was property law. And the reason I had to resit it was because the exam clashed with a boxing match I was having in Edinburgh. So I went in and signed my name, because you got 5% for signing your name. I went in, signed my name, and left. And so I knew the result would be I'd have to resit it.
Right.
And when I was studying for those resits, I actually studied on a number of film sets. I was on Gladiator, I was in The Mummy, and I was also in a less exciting way, I was in a film called Entrapment with Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah.
But that was just driving a car up and down a street, which was actually risky, because a Gladiator and The Mummy, I was doing horse work.
Right.
And for me, driving the car up and down the street was way riskier, because I'd only just got my license. So, and I hadn't driven since my test. So it's actually much riskier than riding the horses.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did those films. One of them was Gladiator, and I had no idea, obviously, what it was. Russell Crowe wasn't famous at the time. It was before LA Confidential had really hit.
Yep.
I guess he was famous in the right circles, but I didn't know who he was.
Gladiator is the movie that skyrocketed him.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, he was, by the time it came out, he was famous for LA Confidential, and for The Inside Man. I think it was The Insider, Michael Mann film. But they both predated it by a couple of years. I think the Michael Mann film was a few months, in fact, and then LA Confidential was a few years before. But he was part of an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're right. What just sent him through the stratosphere was Gladiator, and I remember going to watch it and just thinking, it was the perfect combination of everything. It was just so well directed. The last great film, I think, that Ridley Scott made.
I agree. Yeah.
And it was really him at the height of his powers. I love the whole idea of Rome. I got married in Rome. Rome's my favorite place in the planet, and that was all sort of helpful.
One of my questions, yes.
And obviously he was Maximus Decimus Meridius was just the most incredible character. Now, going back to the question we had earlier, actually, about why they're not making good films, we were talking about templates.
Yes.
You watch Gladiator and then watch Braveheart. They're the same film. They're actually they're the same film. And that's interesting that they're both very good. Gladiator's better, but they're both very good. Braveheart, I struggle with from the historical point of view, because it's such a load of shit. Just made everything up. That was not quite as bad as The Patriot that he made shortly afterwards. But I mean, I'm not one of those who comes down heavy on Mel Gibson. I think he was a great actor, a great director, and I like him very much. And I think that frankly, some people who have issues such as alcoholism probably need a little bit more sympathy than we're giving them, because we've come down very hard on him. Yeah. And some would say that that's deserved, but the man has got a sickness. He's got an illness. Yeah. And we are very understanding to a lot of people, and then we choose who we're not understanding to. And he seems to be on the receiving end of us choosing not to be very understanding. But as an aside, anyway. Gladiator and Braveheart, the same film essentially, but Gladiator is the better version. And it's just brilliant. I watched this in Rome with my wife, in the Gran Melia, the Via di Agrippina in Gran Melia, just outside Rome, which is this lovely hotel that's built upon the villa of Caligula's wife, Claudius's wife, who was also Nero's mum.
Right.
She's probably the most famous woman in Roman history. And they were building this hotel, and when they were building it, they found her villa that they'd been looking for 1,000 years.
Right.
And so they had to stop building it, and it's now a museum and a hotel. So we were staying there. And they had Gladiator, but they only had it in German. So my then girlfriend, who became my wife, and it was probably this particular night that made me realize that she would probably marry me. She had to watch this film in German while I did all of the lines for her. I recited every single bit of dialogue. I translated, despite not knowing a word of German.
Oh my God!
That's how much I've watched this film, and that's how well I know this film. It could not be in there.
So you were in it. So what scenes do you know what scenes that they were?
Germania.
Right.
Germania. That was filmed in Farnham Wood in Surrey. It never went anywhere near Germania. Exactly the same place, the identical place as the scene in The Mummy, where they're on the Nile and the ship gets set fire and they will have to jump off into the Nile. That was also Farnham Wood. That wasn't Egypt. Movie magic, so it's always
Yes,
ruined when you speak to someone who was there.
it's
So
true.
yeah, so I was in the scene with the galloping through the forest with
Oh,
the cavalry.
wow. Oh, that's really cool. That's really so. Did
They
you was because obviously in the movie Russell Crowe was there. Was he there during
yeah.
during that, or was this just like
Not that part. It might have been there one of the other ones when the
right,
actual battle, but no, the galloping didn't involve him. He did
right,
not tell us anything about Elysium. There was no this life or the next or any of that business. It was basically, it was just all it was they needed a load of people who could ride horses,
yeah,
and who could gallop a horse.
right,
And galloping a horse through a wood is not that easy.
yeah.
And so anybody who'd had any experience on horseback was drummed up by the stunt coordinators on the film were my aunt's cousins, and so she my uncle, her husband got me a job in it.
Oh, that's really cool. That would be really fun. That would have been really fun to have been in something like that. I've been close to film sets, but I've never been able to be an extra in something. But maybe one day. But those are two really cool films to have been extras in, both Gladiator and The Mummy.
Technically stunt work. Now I'm not offended by that, but people who do stunt work will be offended by that.
Okay, right, stunt work. Yes, it's true. It's stunt work. It is stunt work. It is. This is true.
Apparently, if you take a horse beyond a trot, it's stunt work. That's the rule.
Okay. Okay.
Crazy. I mean, it's much harder to stay on a horse when it's trotting than it is when it's galloping. So I don't really understand why.
I don't know. They gotta set the line somewhere, I guess. Yeah. I agree. Maximus is a really cool character. What do you think? Sometimes he's kind of described as a working class hero. What's your take on Maximus in regards to like that aspect?
Well, I think he certainly isn't a working class hero. I mean, he's a member of the Roman aristocracy. I mean, you don't get to be a general if you weren't a member of the Roman aristocracy. But yeah, he's so not so much working class hero as such, but he's certainly a man of action. He's certainly a grounded man who does what he does. My high opinion of that character can be best summarized by telling you that whenever I'm writing Joe Dempsey, my Bond, whenever I'm writing Joe Dempsey and I wonder what he would do in a certain circumstance, I ask myself, what would Maximus do? Because in my mind, everything about Maximus Decimus Meridius in that book is just Joe Dempsey if he were in that circumstance. He's very much him 2,000 years later. So all the strength and honor and the stoicism and this is what you do. This is what a man does, and that's what's got to be finished.
Yeah.
I know we live in a world now where you get in trouble for saying things like that's what a man does. But I like that. I like things like that. And I think a great deal more people like things like that than would be willing to admit.
Oh, well, yeah.
That a lot of people, the number of people who hate things like that are smaller than we think and just very vocal. So I'm standing by it. I like that as a concept for a character. I like thinking this is what a man does. You do this is what a man does, and this is what a man must do, and that's your responsibility. That's your duty, and whatever the cost, you do it. Yeah. And that's what Maximus does. Yeah. And that's what Joe Dempsey does. And Joe Dempsey is very heavily influenced by Maximus.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I actually completely agree with that. I think it's on one level it's sort of complicated in that it's just because you're saying or one is saying that this is what a man doesn't mean that's not derogatory towards like what a woman can do and should do. But I think what it really speaks to, and this is I'm a real big fan of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and kind of the importance of myth and stuff like that within culture and society and stuff like that. What we're really saying by saying this is what a man does, it is really kind of rooted in kind of like an honor system. It is rooted in what the hero is meant to do.
It's rooted in our classic culture.
Yes. Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's where we all come from.
Yes.
We are products of that culture.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Not everything has to change.
No, I completely agree. Some of this stuff is actually vital, and by losing it and ignoring it is doing far more harm than it is good, and I think
Yeah,
we're seeing a lot of that right now, and I agree. You know, there are, I hate the term vocal minority. It really irks me, but there is, because I think people say it really just to like irk
mm,
people.
yeah,
But the people that scream on Twitter, like Twitter is so not the real world,
yeah.
and
Classic echo chamber.
yes, and it is funny when you step outside your door and you speak to people who aren't on social media, or it's not their life, or they're really just on Instagram to take pictures of their
Yeah,
cats, you know, that when you tell them about some sort of online drama, they're like, "What? I don't know
mm,
anything about that," you know, because it doesn't exist outside of Twitter. But
doesn't.
but there's so much of pop culture and entertainment that is so embedded and connected to the pulse of Twitter that it's doing way more harm in terms of our creative output
Yeah.
than good for sure.
Well, you and I had an interaction today, actually, on Twitter when we discovered that they're now going to up the 480 characters to 2,000 characters.
Fuck
Everyone
me.
has spoken about the end of Twitter. Everyone's gone on about oh yeah, we're going to stop because Musk is there. We're going to stop for this. We're going to. No one's actually doing it. It's all
No.
bollocks. No one's
Yeah.
doing it. No one's principles get them that far. Again, no one else is Maximus. No one else is Dempsey. No
Yeah.
one else does Strength and Honor. They
Yes.
just say it and then they don't
Yeah.
do it. The
Yeah.
thing that's going to end Twitter is not fascism. The thing that's going to end Twitter is not Musk. It's not the return of Trump. The thing that's
Mm.
going to end Twitter is that Musk doesn't understand what Twitter is.
Yeah.
And the moment he extends it to 2,000 characters, that's what will end Twitter.
Yeah.
At that point, it stops being Twitter, and that's when
Yeah.
it will end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a time I was just checking out one of the other newer sites called Hive. I think it was, yeah, Hive. And it's basically the exact same thing as Twitter. But then what I noticed is that some people their posts just went on and on and on because there wasn't a limit. And
Yeah,
essentially someone has typed on their phone, because this is a phone only application. Someone
you
has
may as well
typed
have
on
a
their
blog.
phone like 5,000 word essay about whatever the heck they're talking about. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even going to read all this. This is ridiculous. So yeah, it's turning Twitter into a Facebook stroke Tumblr hybrid is
Mm.
that absolutely will be the thing
Yeah,
that kills it.
yeah. It's not principle; it's application.
No. Yeah, no. I mean, I kind of, I made a comment about that similar while ago, where people are like, oh, how Musk is taking over, and I think Musk is he's a c word. I don't
Mm.
like him. He's a piece of shit. But the thing that irked me is everyone was kind of virtue signaling as hard as they can to say they're going to leave Twitter, all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Obviously they do not. And they're like, oh, he's going to bring Trump back. He's going to bring what's the other crazy guy that he brought back
Oh
for a
yeah,
while
I
back?
don't know. I'd
Kanye.
never heard of him. I'd never heard it. Oh no, that was Kanye. No, there's another guy, isn't there, as well, who I'd never heard of.
I
Who's
think
this
so.
misogynistic fella? I'd never heard of him until everyone was moaning about him coming back.
Yes.
So
And
stop talking about it.
the thing that got me was, I was like, look, I was like, okay, I get it. You're mad that he's going to let these people come back, but you got to remember that, like, Twitter did nothing about these people for a very,
Yeah,
very, very, very long time. Twitter didn't have the balls to actually
no,
get rid of Donald Trump until after he lost the election. Only then did they finally pull the plug.
yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, come on, guys.
After he ran
Come
an
on.
insurrection, he
After
incited an
he ran
insurrection. And
insurrection.
at that
Yeah.
point, after an insurrection in the United States of America in Capitol
Yeah.
Hill, then it was
Yes.
okay to get rid of him.
Yes.
All the
Yeah.
conspiracy theories we're seeing at the moment, or the stuff that Musk is releasing about, oh well, they got together with the SBI and they were monitoring him. He was telling lies on
Yeah.
Twitter with the express intention of whipping up an insurrection after losing an election. If they weren't monitoring him, I'd be very, very, very worried. The whole idea that is in some way treason. So what,
Yeah.
you can do this shit if you're the president, can you? No, you can't. There are
No.
rules.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
the FBI are monitoring him.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's nonsense. So that for me. I'm like, look, we can all look for the next social media platform to go to. I don't mind looking and seeing what else is out there, for whatever reason. But it's the moral high horseness of it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, nah.
As I say,
Come on, guys.
that's the thing. The thing that will kill it. It's not going to be because anyone has stuck to their principles. It's going to be
No.
because it's gone up to 2,000 characters, and that isn't Twitter.
Yeah. What's interesting, kind of linking this back to Maximus, and sort of what we were saying about, how, this is what a man does and things like that. The film is has an interesting kind of take on not take, but how it presents masculinity. And I think the way Maximus is presented versus I'm not going to pronounce his name right. Commodus.
Commodus, yeah.
Yeah, that guy, Joaquin Phoenix. I can say his more complicated real name. Now that is interesting because obviously what they're depicting these two individuals where Maximus obviously comes from. I guess he comes from his father was like a farmer or something like that, which I think is where people kind of get the working class hero idea from. He comes from that kind of world, whereas.
They don't like to think about who was actually working those fields.
Right. Well, that is true. But and then he's coming from born into the wealth and all that kind of stuff, and then how they are kind of reacting to their circumstances, exploring what is real masculinity, I guess. Which I found that quite fascinating. I don't know what your take is on that, but I found it fascinating.
My take is that I think Maximus is everything that. When I say, I say it as what a man should be, etc. It's an idealized man. Yeah,
yes,
we're not all that way. No, and maybe almost none of us are that way. But the whole principle of he is this character who is capable of this. We know because he's put into these positions, he's capable of incredible violence, and he's very good at it. And he's very, very good at it. But he doesn't want to do it. It's not what he's looking for. He's a gentle man who can be exceptionally ungentle when he needs to be. And in my mind, that's a man. That's what a man should be. A man doesn't have to be capable of being the best. No one needs to be the toughest. No one needs to be the hardest. I was telling you earlier, my 4-year-old son, I'm starting to teach him to box now. Because I believe strongly that a man should be able to defend himself.
Yes.
And more and more so in this world, and that includes kids as they're getting older. A man should be able to defend himself. Doesn't mean he's got to be the toughest. It doesn't mean he's got to win. Winning is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Fighting back is what matters. Yeah. Not just being a victim is what matters. A man should not be a victim. A man should stand up for himself. And if you lose, you lose. But you lose fighting. Yeah, you go down punching is the old expression, isn't it? I'm going to go down punching. It's not about being the toughest. It's not about being the hardest. It's not about being a winner. It's just about not being a victim. And I believe that's all boys should understand that. We would have a better world if we were allowed to teach our kids that. I mean, I teach my son's football team on a Saturday.
Yeah,
and I can't play football to save my life. But they're 4 years old, so you're just corralling them, and you're just making sure.
Right.
And the kid that tries hardest each week gets a little medal, and they get to keep it for a week. And we've had a number of people say to us, "Oh, we don't think they should get a medal. For one child should get a medal. They should all just get their stickers, and they should all be." No, this teaches them how to. If you look at the death rate amongst young men now, suicide rate, it's just off the charts compared to where it's ever been before.
Yeah.
And I believe a big part of that is boys don't know what men are anymore. And this isn't a trans thing. This isn't a cis thing. This is about just boys who are boys who are boys. They don't know what it's like to be men because they're not taught. They're not taught to try to win, and they're not taught to lose.
Yeah.
Learning to lose is more important than learning to win, because then you learn that life isn't all a bed of roses, and that you can try hard, but it's not fairy tale. You can try hard and fail. You need to learn to fail. And I think that stopping that in the last 20, 25 years, as they have done, is a huge part of why we're having the mental health crisis amongst boys. And I mean, there are many other factors, but I think that's a big part of it. And I just think that, boys should learn to be men. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said. That doesn't mean you've got to be the tough one. Yeah. It just means you've got to not be the victim.
Yes.
And that for me is Maximus. He happens to be the tough one, but that doesn't matter one way or the other with him. Actually, the reality is he's just going to fight back.
Yeah. He's kind of fulfilling the role of the aspirational hero. He's
Yeah.
the guy that we all he's the individual. If you want to strip the whatever the out of it, that he is the individual that we all want to aspire to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the important thing. That is why I think, you know, when kind of returning a little bit to Biffer's question, like why are 90% of movies junk right now? There that sort of thing is lost. And I think we'll talk about Superman in a little bit, but you know, the Man of Steel, all that kind of stuff, that aspirational aspect of that particular kind of character being ejected out for this nihilistic, depressing, you know, woe is me sort of attitude. Is really not good. But also then you sort of have the other aspect, the sort of the Spider-Man kind of characters, where you know they are sort of they're learning from their mistakes, they're learning from their failures. Spider-Man learns to be Spider-Man because he failed to do the right thing, and then he realized he's got responsibility and has to live up to that. And there is, you know, those, and I think if you look at I don't know what your take is on the new Spider-Man movies, but I think they fucking suck. I think the kid who plays Spider-Man, nothing against him as an actor, but like he isn't playing Spider-Man. There's no conviction. There's no sense of responsibility. They tried to shoehorn all that in that last movie, but
they've tried to make him too much of a kid.
Yeah,
I mean, I know Spider-Man is a kid, but he's a kid with that other stuff. Whereas this, they've gone full on, sort of wholeheartedly into you're a teenager.
Yeah,
let's have you chasing goals and not getting there.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, I don't know if you ever saw the show Smallville when that came out. I mentioned Smallville almost every episode.
I saw them all.
Yep, I love Smallville. They're the guy who the two guys who play Clark and Lex, Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum. Michael Rosenbaum was actually from Indiana, where I'm from, which is pretty cool. They're
also
doing
the second best Lex Luthor ever after Clancy Brown.
Yes, I completely agree. Oh, he is terrific. Michael Rosenbaum is he might be my favorite. I'm not gonna lie. But they're doing a rewatch of Smallville, which is quite fun because Michael's never seen the show, so he's rewatching it, and they're doing a podcast about it.
I assume they've not invited Alison Mack.
She's in jail, so probably not going to happen. They have kind
everything goes quiet whenever her scenes come on.
They do talk about her, but and they have occasionally mentioned some of the stuff that's gone on, and it's awkward, and you can tell they're shocked by it and still a bit sort of uncomfortable with it, which makes perfect sense. But my point is Smallville was another one of those great shows where we're actually seeing, you know, you're seeing Clark from that young age, and that was such an important show for me because I was kind of Clark's age when it came out, so I was the things that he was going through on an adolescent level. I was like, I was really relating to that kind of stuff and learning, you know, through other means as well. But really, there was a lot that I was learning from his journey of that kind of that adolescent, that the hero's journey is an adolescent into adulthood, psychological development, basically. And there was so much that was generated from that was quite important, and he was learning from his failures and from his selfishness and all that kind of stuff. And I do feel there was a huge lack of that stuff in modern day storytelling. And again, back to Top Gun, I think there's another reason why Top Gun was such a hit. And it was because, oh my God, we actually are looking at a real hero, heroes, you know, that, you know, I don't think we see that much of these days.
The closest we have to it in Marvel is probably either Tony Stark or Captain America is perfect from the beginning. You know, even when he's small, he's still perfect.
Yeah,
he's the hero.
Yeah,
I think you the only two that actually have an arc are Tony Stark and Thor. And unfortunately, their arc ended and their films carried on. So so you've forgotten the arc. The first phases 1 and 2 and maybe into 3 they've got the arc, or phases 1 and 2 they've got the arc, but then you're in phase 3 and they then basically do the arc all over again for Thor in Ragnarok, which actually did kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, Tony Stark though, he's become a bit of a dick by the end of it.
That was my problem. Yeah, I had that problem with him because he has such a wonderful story arc in the first Iron Man movie. The heartless guy finds a heart, right? That perfect, just perfectly done. Iron Man 2 was a bad film, and they kind of make a joke of alcoholism, which was annoying. That was Disney's fault, by the way.
They stepped in and pulled back. Was Demon in a Bottle they were supposed to be doing, weren't they? And then but then Iron Man 3 tried to do something interesting with giving him a little bit of PTSD from the Avengers, which I was like, I have to say, I think the most underrated Marvel film.
I agree. I know people get mad because the Mandarin wasn't the Mandarin. I don't give a crap.
Great twist.
It was a good movie.
It's a great twist.
Yeah.
It's a really good everything about that was a good movie.
Yeah, I agree. It is one of my favorite. At the moment, I used to own a lot of the Marvel films, but I got rid of them because I just don't care anymore. But Iron Man 1 and 3 are I own those because I'm like, nope, those are good. Those are good movies. Because after Iron Man 3, Tony, they don't know what to do with him anymore, and they stop progressing him, and he just becomes really snarky and just kind of juvenile, and they lose the plot. He reverts back to Tony in Iron Man 1. And I think the perfect example of that was what they did with Endgame, by having him demand that when they bring people back, they bring them back 5 years into the future.
Yeah.
It was such a stupid idea. Such a dumb idea.
Yeah.
And also a selfish idea.
Well, because it means the entire world's already got the damage is done.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of people will be in midair.
I was going to say that. Yeah. What happened to all the people who are in planes?
Yeah. We never got to that bit.
Nope. But think the idea that Tony would need to sacrifice his daughter.
Yeah.
To save the world.
It's a much better story.
Come on. Like, how did you miss that Endgame? How did you miss that perfect moment for a character who she's not going to be around in the MCU. No one gives a crap. Like, that's the perfect character to sacrifice. And it's also emotional. Like, come on. I sound like the kid from South Park. Come on.
No, good. I had never thought of it. I actually had not thought of that for a moment, but that's bang on.
Yeah, that's what they should have done. So anyway, Gladiator. Last two things on Gladiator.
They didn't hold back on sacrificing the kid in Gladiator.
Goodness gracious, no, they didn't. Crikey. I find it interesting. I don't know if you're aware of this. Hans Zimmer obviously does the music.
Yeah.
There's a lot of repurposed themes in Gladiator, rather in Pirates of the Caribbean, that were in Gladiator.
I listen to a Hans Zimmer essential score collection when I'm writing. It's most of what I listen to.
Nice.
Because it goes on for 7 hours and it's just all different sorts of music and there's no words to distract you. And yes, it's very clear. It's very, very clear.
Yep. I feel like it was one of those things Hans is like, this score is great and I need to make it famous somehow.
Exactly. I've got to use it again.
He just kept going until it landed, and it landed with Pirates. Now I did hear that the sequel was announced to Gladiator.
Yeah, they had an idea for a sequel. There's two ideas. The first sequel idea they had included Russell Crowe, but he's eaten himself out of contention now. Clearly, I'm allowed to say that because I was in similar shape to him when that film came out, and I'm in similar shape to how he is now. So so I'm allowed to say it. He's eaten himself out of contention. The idea was that he would fight his way through the underworld. Gladiator, basically Gladiator in the underworld. So completely different genre, really. But that's now gone by the by. The new idea is that it's going to be the child, the child of Lucia. Is Lucius, the boy Lucius.
Okay, that could be fun. That could be fun.
Yeah, I don't know more than that. Mean, they've not really announced any detail more than that. But it's conceivably about Lucius. Whether he'll be the bad guy or the good guy, who knows?
Ah, fun. Anyway, Gladiator is a terrific choice for a film. I totally get why that would be one of your top 3 to, if you could only pick 3 to ever rewatch, why that one would be there.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to your last couple of books, and then we'll talk about, Superman. Um, so the next book is The Winner by David Baldacci. I think I said his name
Yes,
right.
you
Um,
did.
I'm not well versed in Baldacci's work, so you're gonna have to walk us through this a little bit. Um, so yeah, I understand this book tells a story of a girl named Luann Taylor,
Yeah.
destitute mother living in a trailer park, meets a guy named Jackson who's running a massive lottery scam inside the
Yeah.
national lottery, and she gets into some trouble. There's some running from the FBI. It's quite it's it reading about this book, 'cause I hadn't read it. It really it felt like, okay, yeah, this I understand why this is one of your books, because it's like
Yeah.
it fits nicely with your kind of the stuff that I think you kind of write, and I
Yeah.
got that. And obviously, when you mentioned that you said your mother gave you this book to read a
Yeah.
long time
When I was
ago.
about 17.
Yeah. So so it was really David's book that was one of your biggest inspirations, then, if I'm not mistaken.
It was my inspiration. If I hadn't read
Yeah.
that book, I may have read another book and I may have gone with it in the same way. But
Right.
I was adamant I didn't want to read a book.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. I was not a reader of fiction books apart from
Yeah.
the classics because they were making me.
Yeah.
My choice, as I say, was always fiction, non-fiction, or mythology, or whatever. And my mum basically forced me to read it. Essentially, she said, "No, you've got to read this. You'll love this," because she knew the TV shows that I liked.
Right.
And I read it, and I absolutely loved it. And I went out and bought Total Control the next day, which was his second book, and I read that. Absolute Power, which is his first book. I read that, and I think David Baldacci is 100% the person that I model my writing on, even today.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about the way these days he writes a lot of series.
Mm-hmm.
And what he tends to do, he writes series, but for a short while. So his first series, I believe, was the Camel Club. There was about 6 of them. Then he wrote Maxwell and King, and I think there's about 4 of those. And he keeps he writes a series till he's bored with the series.
Yeah.
And because he writes 2 books a year, he's writing 2 series at once. And then sometimes they all cross over in the way that mine cross over, less so than mine, not quite so explicitly. It's at the beginning of each.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's had some failings. He's had some. There's a period of time where I stopped reading him. I just felt I felt he went off for a period of time. If he ever sees this, I doubt he will. I'm sorry, but all in across his career, I think he's just absolutely exceptional. And I do think that his first run of 5 books, Absolute Power up to Last Man Standing, maybe 6 books. Yeah, I think that's 6 books. The first run of 6 books, all of them standalones. I don't think any thriller writer has ever written a more consistently brilliant run of standalone books. Right. They're so clever. They're all of them high concept. I like, because I like what he writes, then I kind of write what he writes because I write what I like. Yeah. I'm not purposely trying to ape him, but there is a great deal of similarity between what we write. And anyone who compares me favorably to him, I would be very, very grateful, because I don't compare myself favorably to him. I say we are very similar, but he's the master.
Yes. Yes.
My publishers have actually taken to publicizing me as the British Baldacci, which is a little bit embarrassing because I send him my proofs to blurb. So I now ask them not to put that on the proofs, so that I can send him a proof, and it doesn't say that. But no, I sent him Power Play, actually, which is my third book.
Yeah.
And on the back of it, he's actually given me an intricate, twisty minefield of geopolitics and absolute power gone rogue. Kent has outdone himself with this one. And I've had some, I had some nice blurbs, I had some great reviews. That one blew me away completely. Yeah. Because to have that on my third book, to have that on your third book from the person who is demonstrably the only reason I'm writing, is was pretty special. So so I had to include a Baldacci book. It had to be The Winner, because that's the one that got me going. But I have to say, I think even if it wasn't the one that had got me writing, it would still be the one that I include. I
Yes.
think that, with the possible exception of the third book we're about to talk about,
Yes.
I think it's the maybe the best thriller I've ever read.
What is it about that? Like what? Because what is it about this book being the best thriller? Like what is the specifics? Maybe without giving too many spoilers in case someone
I won't
hasn't.
give any plot away. I'll tell
Yeah.
you what I think it is. When I
Mm.
write with the express intention of painting a film in your head.
Mm.
It may become quite obvious to anyone watching this that I'm as passionate about films as I am about books, and I actually think there's a massive crossover when you write thrillers.
Yeah.
Not every genre can do this, but I think when writing thrillers, and certainly the kind of thrillers that I write,
Yeah.
you should be able to see this.
Yeah.
You should be able to watch this play in your mind if we're doing our job right.
Yeah.
And for me, the winner does that better than anyone has ever done that.
Mm.
I got a third of the way into this book and I found I was already casting it. We spoke about Mel Gibson earlier. I had Mel Gibson playing the main lead.
Wow.
I had Kevin Spacey was in it playing Jackson. I also remember, but I know it's wrong, that I had Charlize Theron playing Luann Tyler. And I couldn't have because she wasn't famous then.
Right.
So that's how that's how much memory can screw you over. I know from the day job that people's memories are not infallible.
Yep.
They can tell you things they truly believe that are wrong, and I truly believe I picked Charlize Theron for Luann Tyler, but I couldn't have because at that time she was living in South Africa and she wasn't famous, so it was impossible. But the point I'm making is I'd cast it. Not only could I see it, I'd cast it. I was watching these famous actors play these roles, and it was. Someone used a quote about Baldacci. I always say Baldacci, which is rude of me because I've been corrected. But someone gave me a quote about Baldacci once, and it said he makes them so good that the bath can go cold around you while you read, or something along those lines. And that for me is that is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It's a perfect description, and it's why it's so good.
Yeah.
To be able to pick one individual thing out about what it's so good about, it was impossible.
Right.
There's nothing in there. In the same as Day of the Jackal, there's nothing in there that stands out as individual genius.
Right.
But collectively, everything as a sum of its parts, it's the perfect thriller.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. I mean, I'm gonna have to get this book and I'm gonna have to read it because this is what's also quite fun about doing this particular show is that there's no way that I'm going to be able to or will have read all the books and or seen all the films that are being recommended. And I think what's quite fun is is learning what other writers sort of their passions are, their who they're passionate about in terms of writing or films like that. And I think I think it comes across the best with this. And I'm like, you've sold the winner to me. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to go get the winner now. I'm gonna have to listen to it either on audiobook or buy the book, but one of the two are going to have to be done.
So I'm confident about my recommendation. It's what normally when you recommend something, someone says, "Oh, I'm going to get that." You think, "Oh shit, have I oversold it?"
Yeah.
The winner, you can't oversell
it. Well, I look forward to reading because it does sound great, and I said I understand why this is definitely in your top because it fits so perfectly with that kind of high octane, thriller political stuff. But right. So let's go on to the next book, The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth, came out in 1971. So this is another really interesting one, and again, it falls into the same vein of political thrillers. And this one's interesting because it's as I was doing some research about it, it's kind of a history. It's at one point. It's fiction steeped in reality, kind of historical fiction in a way because it's about the past. It's not that far away, but yeah. So it's about about a professional assassin who was contracted by the OAS, and they basically want to kill the French president, who in real life in 1962. They tried and failed.
They tried many times. The most assassination attempts on any head of state ever.
Yeah. So what is it about this book that that made it onto the list as your last book?
I think it is a book that any thriller fan must read. It's it's the classic serious thriller. It's not a Baldacci, it's not a Tony Kent. It's a serious thriller. It's what I write and what Baldacci writes. They are they are not so heightened that at any point when you read what we write, you would stop and think, oh, come on. We don't do that. We don't write things that would take you out of the moment. We don't write things that would make you think, oh, that's just unrealistic, and that's not, that's etc. etc. But I think for both of us, I can't speak for him. Certainly speak for myself. If you were to then, at the end of the book, start looking back over it, there might be a couple of things where you think, well, I guess that might be a bit over. Yeah, they are heightened. They are written for entertainment. They are written as films, effectively. You know, they are these things, and yeah, there are things where we exaggerate. There are things where we go over the top, and I like to think we do so with enough. That I do so with enough pace, and with enough plot and with enough characterization that you're fine with it, and you don't notice it in the course of it, and you keep turning the page, and afterwards you might think back and think maybe whatever.
Yeah,
that certainly exists with me. I would strongly argue it exists with David Baldacci. It does not exist with Frederick Forsyth. The Day of the Jackal is as close to reality as fiction can possibly get when it's dealing with something as exciting and as thrilling as this.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is, as we just said, it steeps in reality. He's taken something that kept happening. Basically, the Charles de Gaulle gave back Algeria. There was an Algerian terrorist. There was an Algerian terrorist campaign to get back control of Algeria, and he gave it back. And the OAS were effectively a terrorist group made up of members of the French military who decided that they hated that and he was a traitor, and so they wanted to kill him. And hence there were endless attempts upon his life. And de Gaulle being de Gaulle, he never changed a single bit about his pattern of behavior in order to do anything about that. He didn't give a shit. He just carried on being de Gaulle. So it made the French Secret Service have a terrible time trying to protect him. And what The Day of the Jackal is about is almost a what if. It's almost a situation. It's one of those books. It's like a Hinges of History book, a Hinges of Battle book, where instead of them stopping, instead of the OAS being broken by the French, what happened was the French Secret Service actually in real life infiltrated the OAS and they just took down their leadership. In this, they haven't taken down the full leadership. Some of them get away to Rome. And when they're in Rome, they decide we need to get somebody, because we've been infiltrated, we need to get somebody from outside of the OAS. And so they go off and they get themselves an English professional killer. And the whole idea is that it's a what if. It's what if they did that? What if they gone and got that guy? So it's broken down into 3 parts. It begins with the anatomy of the plot. And then it's what's what they call it? The anatomy of the manhunt is the next one. And then the anatomy of the kill. So first of all, it's the history is the first part, and then the what if part of the history. And at the end of that, we've got the Jackal is put in there. And then we have the manhunt with the French. Claude Liebel is chasing the Jackal, trying to find out who he is. Decides the only way to solve this is to get the man's identity. So they're in France and they're in England trying to get the identity of this English professional killer. And then they find his identity, or do they? I don't think I can do any spoilers, can I? I mean, it's 50 years old. But they think they've got his identity, and then the next bit is them trying to catch him. And I mean, it's just so perfectly written, because Frederick Forsyth was a spy. Frederick Forsyth was part of all these things. He was involved with the Secret Service. He was involved with the French Secret Service. Everything is written from a point of reality, and then his imagination takes it on. So this is how it did really happen to point A. So what about how it would have happened to point B with exactly the same level of reality? But his skill as a writer is such that you can get that reality and not bore you with it, because there are a lot of ex-spies that have written books, and most of them are really boring because they don't know when to deviate, because spying is dull. The one thing all spies will tell you is spying is dull. And you have to know when to deviate from the reality to the excitement. I mean, people talk about, you say spying, so what about James Bond? James Bond's not a spy. James Bond's an assassin. Joe Dempsey, who I write, was an assassin. He's now an investigator. He's not a spy. Yeah, they'll be classed as spies because that's the kind of genre you're in, but they're not. The interesting books about spies, no one's really a spy, unless it's written by John le Carre, who could just somehow write this stuff, like
I was
just
gonna say,
incredible stuff,
yes.
and yet still be really realistic.
Yeah.
So going back to Frederick Forsyth, I mean, he actually wrote this book. I was at an event with him recently and spent the whole night talking to him like a lapdog. And it's just fascinating, man. He wrote this book because he'd gone skint. He'd lost his job because he'd supported the wrong side of the Biafran War. He'd lost his job. He had people to support, and he thought, I know what I'll do. I'll write a book.
Yes.
And everyone was saying to him, "Don't. That's 100 million to one shot. It's a million to one shot." He wrote the book. They published it without changing a word. They
really
didn't edit. They didn't edit it. He said they did not edit a word. They just published it. And. And he also, he's modest enough to say that's the only time this ever happened. He said, don't think that's how it works for me all the time. He said, but on this one, he did not edit a word. He published it, wrote it in 3 months or 4 months, put it in. They had an auction.
There was a bit of trivia on Wikipedia, so take that with a pinch of salt. That said the Day of the Jackal was written in 35 days from January to February 1970. And then it says remained unpublished for almost a year and a half. So I'm assuming in that year and a half, he probably did some work on it. It wasn't 35 days of genius, but
no, the way he tells it, it was. Now you say it, I remember. I don't know where I got 4 months from. I'm mixing it up with something else. But no, it was 35 days. He just sat down and wrote it.
But I'm assuming he edited it over that year and a half.
Not how he tells it, but that's another matter, isn't it? I mean, he is a writer.
I don't believe him.
There is a lot of bullshit comes out of writers' mouths.
It's like when Sylvester Stallone says he wrote Rocky in a day or whatever. I'm like, bullshit. Yeah. You probably outlined it in a day. I'll buy that. You didn't write it in a day. But still,
you can outline it in the course of the Chuck Wepner fight that he watched that inspired it. That fight is Rocky.
Right? Yes. But obviously, to write a book, to get a book done in 35 days is very impressive in and of itself.
And it's not. Let's be honest. It's not a short book.
Right? No, it's not at all.
This is my special signed edition.
Oh, that's nice.
Just so you know that I didn't just make this. I didn't just pluck this book out of the air when I was telling you how much I loved it.
No, these are great. These are great book choices. I find them. They both sound incredibly interesting. I think anyone listening, it's clearly worth picking them up and giving them a read.
Anyone wants to be a thriller writer or even deems himself a thriller reader, you should read them both. You must read Day of the Jackal. It's the daddy of everything.
Yeah. There you go. All right. So we're on to your final pick, which is your last movie, which is Superman the movie, 1978 by Richard Donner. Director Richard Donner, written by Mario Puzo, The Godfather, guy who wrote The Godfather, which
very heavily rewritten. They never mention.
This is true. I would like to know. I would like to know what his quite original draft is. It sounds like the beats are the same, but I would like to know what his original draft was.
The original draft was very much in the tone of Batman, the TV show.
Oh, a bit campy.
Yeah, very camp. There was one scene, for example, that Richard Donner talks about where he sees a bald man that he assumes is Luther. He goes down and it's Telly Savalas, turns around and says, "Who loves your baby?" like Kojak. It was just that kind of a thing. Richard Donner came up with a word called verisimilitude or something. Verisimilitude. Complete bullshit word that just basically said, we know this is ridiculous. However, every single bit of this must be true. And I do believe that's the only reason that film worked.
I think so. What's fascinating to me about Superman, I love this movie. I'm with you. This is a great movie to pick. But it's every chunk is believable, and it's divided into. There's almost it's other people have made this the connection as well, but it's divided into 3 different types of movie. It's your sci-fi movie at the beginning, your kind of 1950s throwback, and then your
Yeah,
modern day, grittiness.
yeah,
And when you think about where the movie starts and then when we finally get to Metropolis and all the nonsense that you've seen, but you buy it all.
yeah.
Like it's strung together so well. Um,
It had to be delivered by Brando, didn't it? I mean, who else? Who else are you going to listen to say all that bollocks and then actually just listen to it and believe it?
yes, yes. I mean, what he's paid, like rumored to be paid like what, 3 million or something like that.
Yeah, something absurd.
And for hardly any lines. It's
What very interesting, and I always find this fascinating. He turned up on set and told them he was going to play it as a tree, and everyone panicked. If you watch him and you watch his delivery, I'm the least pretentious person in the world about acting. I think a lot of it's quite a lot of bullshit and bollocks that people come out with, and I'm always throwing my eyes up in the air. If you watch Brando playing Jarrell, you can kind of see what he means.
yes.
When he said he's playing it like a tree, it's like an old sort of massive strong oak. At the center of everything. You kind of see it. I mean, as I said, ordinarily I hear stuff like that, I just want to laugh and punch them. But
yes,
you listen to what Brando said, and it's you actually kind of see it.
Yeah, I mean, he is in a. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of kind of I guess Christian imagery that is connected to Superman. And
ironic, given just given the religion of the.
It's true. Given
the whole
that
idea of Superman was about the sort of immigrant process, and
yes. But also, I guess when you think about it, the Christian reference is the one that's the most popular. But there are many other heroes and myths throughout history that are almost identical to that. So it just happens that tends to be the one that gets the most recognition. But I don't remember what I was going to say about that now. But yeah,
sorry.
It's right. So first off, let's go back to the questions. And so, what was it? Why does Superman make the list of all the comic book movies out there? There's a lot of really good ones. What is it about Superman 1978 78 that's like this has to be on there?
I was born around the same time as a few months before Superman came out. I was born a few months before Superman came out. It was basically an ever-present in my life because from the moment I can remember. And the first film I went to see in the cinema was Superman 2. I was so young that I certainly can't remember it, but I apparently was just sat there, I think about 18 months old, and didn't move a muscle while we watched the film. Everything about it's the character of Superman, it's the films of Superman. They've just been this sort of central thing in my life that I became very obsessed with at a very, very young age. And I'll tell you how young. I was young enough that I genuinely believed I could fly. I believed absolutely I was Superman. I believed absolutely I could fly. I was jumping off things, and I've got scars in all different parts of my body where I cut them to pieces, landing on things. And my mum, in the end, was bright enough to think he needs something else to be obsessed with. And Flash Gordon had just come out, and they paid. Remember, my mum and dad had no money at this stage. They were very young. We're living on a council estate. They managed to save up and get a Betamax cassette player and a copy of Flash Gordon, and they used to sit me down to watch it every day, so that I would be someone who wasn't Superman. To break my obsession with Superman, they had to make me obsessed with something else. And that was Flash Gordon. And I got obsessed with that to the extent that from the age of 4 till 8, I didn't answer to my name. I wouldn't answer to Tony. I would only answer to Flash. And there are members of my family who still call me Flash.
Oh, that's great.
There was 4 years of my life where I wasn't Tony. I wouldn't be Tony. I was Flash.
Yeah.
I had nuns at my Catholic school used to call me Flash. I had people at my university who'd heard this story and suddenly started calling me Flash. All throughout my life, my younger sister and brother, still call me Flash. The reason for that is, in fairness, one of the reasons is that we are a massive Irish family, and there's loads of Tonys, so it's an easy way to. There's young Tony, cousin Tony, big Tony, small Tony. Flash is just an easy way to differentiate.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, I was so obsessed with Superman that they had to transfer that obsession over. But then I got to about 8 o'clock at 8 years old, and then the Superman obsession just came back because it's Superman, and that's I can't put a finger on much about it apart from it's just this ever-present thing in my life that I was just in awe of, absolutely in awe of. And as many hits as I've taken in terms of Superman, I mean, I got the hit of Superman 3, got the hit of Superman 4, got the hit of Superman Returns, which actually is in many ways an underrated film, but still completely completely destroyed by the fact they made him a stalker and an absentee dad. I mean, what was that about? That was so close to being a good film, but then stalker and absentee dad kind of ruins it. And then going back, and then Man of Steel, as you said. I mean, they've got this. They spoke about on my planet this means hope. Well, that's the only hopeful thing about the whole film. Everything else about it was just dour and depressed, and isn't it terrible to be a god, and all of this business. And it's just, you look at it and think, what's it's just, this is the opposite of what this is supposed to be. And yet, for all of those things, nothing takes away from Superman 1, and to a lesser extent, because Richard Lester ruined some of it, Superman 2. The bits that Donna made are even better than Superman 1. But I mean, Christopher Reeve, I mean, where did they find him? He reminds me, in the role of Superman, he reminds me of, I'm going to say this, even though Gal Gadot, I felt, was the same kind of a find for Wonder Woman. It then all went very, very wrong after the first Wonder Woman film.
Dear God.
But in that first film, she was kind of the same level of find. I think that Chris Hemsworth in the first Thor film was the same kind of level of find, but the film was nowhere near as no, it didn't come close. And you look at these people because they don't look human, do they? I mean, they look like gods. And you're like, where did you find you three? But no one beats Reeve to that extent. I mean, he was just it was just like he'd been beamed down from somewhere. And he was just Superman.
What was so great about Reeve, I think, is that the big tagline is that you'll believe a man can fly, right? But like, I feel like it really should be like, you'll believe Clark Kent. You'll believe Clark Kent, because
you'll believe people couldn't tell the difference.
Because gosh, the way he maneuvers that, he does it so well. And
it's that one famous scene, isn't it? There's a one famous scene where glasses come off, he stands upright, and he gains 6 inches in height, and his chest comes out, and and then he deflates again, and he's like, how do you do that?
It's like, oh God, that's why. But then you look at someone like, I mean, I'm not knocking on Henry Cavill, but like, Henry Cavill doesn't have that. I mean, there's a reason why Lois Lane finds out that he's Superman and Man of Steel straight away.
Because
you're not going to mask it. You're not going to mask it. It's not going to happen. He looks exactly the same in both Clark and Superman. So it's kind of like, okay, but like, he is the, I think Brandon Routh did really well to emulate Christopher Reeves in Superman Returns, which again, I think is quite a shame that movie is such a stinker, because as you're talking about, like, where do you find, like, they found someone who really, really looked and could nail acting like Reeves, and they squandered it for whatever reason, which that is a shame. But I think I'm kind of with you on Superman the movie. Like,
I didn't think Ralph could pull off Superman as well as he pulled off Clark Kent. I thought he was much better than Superman.
I agree.
Whereas Reeve was great as both.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I think so. I Superman came out. I think you're 10 years older than I am. So I was, but Superman the movie was huge in the late 80s. you know, and the early 90s. So that for me was Superman growing up, was
Yeah.
also Christopher Reeve
Well,
Superman.
it was the only thing, wasn't it, for all that time? Now we've got another superhero movie every 3 months, and probably more than
Exactly.
that. Back then, I mean, as I say, I'm 10 years older than you, and we both had the same superhero movie.
Yes, yeah. Back when they meant something, I guess. But yeah, no. So I totally get the obsession with that, because this movie really brings that character to life in a really meaningful way, I think. Um, and yeah, so I think, were you also reading the comics, or was it just the movie that you were obsessed with?
I was reading the comics.
Mm.
I was never very good at keeping up with comics. We did,
It's
yeah.
hard.
We only had one little shop down the road, and they bring in stuff when they could.
Yeah,
And they'd get. I mean, the guy would go and try and get me Superman stuff all the time.
right.
But yeah, there was no real consistency with it.
Yeah.
No. So I was sort of very heavily into Superman when they had the changeover. Was it John Byrne? When they did the John Byrne changeover, when they depowered him, not completely, but they tried to they took the Silver Age Superman and tried to bring him down a bit because he'd got a bit ridiculous. But no, I was never a reader, a religious reader.
Yeah.
It was very much films first.
Yeah. That's I'm kind of the same with a lot of this stuff as well. I tend to I don't collect on a regular basis. It's like every once in a while I might get a collection or something like that. But yeah, to collect the actual weekly or monthly, whatever it is it gets a little
never near that.
Gets a little daunting. So with Christopher Reeves being the perfect kind of casting for Superman, I'm interested in your opinion on some of the other cast. What about Margot Kidder? What did you think of her Lois?
Never got it. I never understood her Lois. But then when you get the box set that came out before, when Superman Returns came out, there was a box set of all 5 with in a silver tin, and that was the first time they included all the screen tests. And when you see who they were screen testing for her, Stockard Channing, Anne Archer, I mean, Margaret Kidder was the best of the bunch.
Yeah,
I'd always wondered how the hell she got cast, because the differing levels of attractiveness of the 2 leads were kind of extreme, weren't they?
A little bit.
But then I saw the other people that were going for the role, and you said, "Oh my God! I mean, what was going on here?
Yeah.
What was the casting call for this?" And
yes,
and yeah. So of the people that I saw on the casting shoot, you kind of get why she got the role. But no, she was always a strange choice for Lois for me.
Do you think
I think Lois? I don't think they've ever got Lois right.
Oh, that's bad. That's bad. My next question was going to be that right there. No, I struggle with all of the Loises. I don't know if you watch Superman and Lois, the sort of
Superman, the new one.
It's yes. On
I'm not a huge. She's better as a character, but again, she doesn't look like Lois to me.
No,
Lois looks like Dana Delaney played her in Superman the animated series. That's Lois.
Yes. Yeah,
Kate Bosworth. Are they mad? Terry Hatcher was probably the closest, but she was on TV.
Yeah, I sort of I grew to really like the Smallville Lois. But that took
Erica
a while.
Durance.
Yeah. I didn't quite like her at first, but I think from it may be just because maybe that was the show that I was watching more religiously, and I never really watched Lois and Clark and stuff like that. But to me, I think she was the one that is the closest to Lois, minus the cartoon, iteration of Lois. But it has been fascinating to me that they've never really nailed Lois on the big screen. Amy Adams is a terrific actress or actor, however they want to be. But as Lois, she's not Lois. She doesn't have the spunk, as they say.
No.
That was bonkers to me. Bonkers.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to understand. And then we spoke about the Lex Luthors. I mean, the Lex Luthors. I think Gene Hackman is the best actor to ever play Lex Luthor. I know some would argue Kevin Spacey, but I think Gene Hackman is one of the best actors that's ever lived. And his Luthor was very, very interesting, and I think he would have absolutely nailed any version of Luthor that he was given. And I think he
Yeah.
nailed the version he was given, but
Yeah.
that's not Luthor. That version
Yeah.
wasn't Luthor.
That's my thing. It's nothing against Gene Hackman, because yes, Gene Hackman is a brilliant actor. So I've always struggled with that, because I'm like, I like Gene Hackman, but what the fuck is this Luthor?
Yeah, who's he playing? Because it's not Lex Luthor.
No, it's almost like, as you were saying earlier, that the original script was quite campy, and Batman-esque, Adam West Batman, for those who are not aware of what we're talking about. It's almost like him and his little, tubby, goofy sidekick are, they've come over from that original draft.
Yeah.
They just didn't change them at all then.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, Otis is definitely out and out comic relief.
Yes, oh, sorry, boss. Do you? It was. I remember as a kid, because like I love the Krypton bits, and I love the Smallville bits. I've always loved the Smallville bits in the original one. And there's a part of me that's, once we get to Metropolis, is where the film gets a little bit uneven, and it's because of Luthor, because of Lois. Nothing to do with Christopher Reeve, Perry White, Jimmy Olsen. They're all good. I'm cool with all that kind of stuff with those guys. But I'm like, your main villain and your love interest they're not up to scratch, and but I guess it doesn't. It's even that said, it still doesn't stop Superman the movie from being kind of an eternal classic at the same time. Normally a situation like this would kind of weaken a film and kind of kill its everlasting appeal, but there's still something quite special about Superman that I think
bits
is able
that work so well.
Yeah.
And the music. I mean, the Hans Zimmer stuff for Man of Steel, it's really good. It's really good. But the John Williams stuff is just all-time greatest thing ever written.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely insane to change it.
Yes. It's like the Bond theme. You don't change Bond's theme. That is Bond's theme.
Yeah.
This is
no matter how much you're going to change how the film goes, you leave that theme.
Exactly. And because obviously even Smallville got that. Smallville used the Superman theme in the show, and I love that. I love the bit it's the end of season 2 when he keeps hearing Jor-El's voice.
Yeah.
And Jor-El is summoning him via the ship to the storm cellar. And there's a great moment where he's walking up, you can see the lights coming out of the cellar. He opens up and goes down. And as he goes down, they just play that hint of that Superman theme.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck yeah. Like, that is Superman. I am so excited. Bring on season 3, because that's Superman. But like, you don't get that excitement from Man of Steel. It just doesn't.
They play it right at the end of just as he turns up in Justice League.
Oh, terrible. Yes, they did. Yes.
And terrible film. And yet for a heartbeat, you're there because they play that. It just does the fanfare, and like, oh, what's going to happen now? And then it's shit again. But it's like,
they do the same thing in Black Adam.
Yes, they did. They
put it back there as well. But it's almost like, have you learned your lesson too late? It's who knows what's going to happen with it feels like such a rocky road there with that, because I'm like, obviously I would love to see what's his name? What's the guy's name who plays Superman now? Henry Cavill. That's it. I'd love to see him do it again and have a proper Superman story with him in that role, and that wonderful music behind him. Like, that would be great. It just seems that it just seems very complicated over there at the moment.
And I think you've got James Gunn taking over. James Gunn is a minor character obsessive. I think the first thing we heard, which I think is going to be the truest thing they've done. I think it's the truest thing we've heard, because it's very much James Gunn. Cancel Aquaman and cast Jason Momoa as Lobu. Lobu's a very interesting character, but that demonstrates where his interests are.
Yes.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, but he's a nobody. No one
Yep.
knows who that is.
No.
And yet that says to me that was so James Gunn when I heard that I just thought, yeah, this is a real problem.
Yes.
This is not the man for this job.
I think they also said they're going to do Hawkman. I don't know.
Right.
Hawkman is I would kind of categorize him in that kind of lesser bottom tiered DC heroes, but
Yeah.
but he
by
was
all means
far,
by all means have them, but you've got to have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman.
yeah.
Green Lantern.
I know people are worried about Gal Gadot. She'll be back as Wonder Woman. Everything was quite strategic. She did her big tweet where she was like, "I love Wonder Woman. I can't wait to do her further adventures." Then like the next day, it's like Patty Jenkins is out. Wonder Woman 3 is done, and it's like,
well, from what I heard the other day, though, I didn't realize this, but Patty Jenkins didn't write the first one, but did write the second one.
I told you on Twitter.
Well, that was okay. I always assume it's Mason Cross that tells me this stuff. And that for me says everything. I mean, it's because the second film is just awful.
You know what's ironic? Zack Snyder was part of the writing team for Wonder Woman.
Well, for the first one.
Yeah. So where the flip was that hopefulness in Superman? God damn it!
Yeah.
Come on, dude.
The second
you
writer.
Did it there.
the other guy in the writing team. It must have been.
must have been because that was, Wonder Woman was like the best of the current DC lot, and it really channeled the most Donner-esque.
Yeah, but the best, not just the best by a bit. It was head and shoulders. I mean, I know Aquaman was the most successful, and there's got to be a reason behind that because it was rubbish. And
the reason behind it is a bunch of stay-at-home moms had a nice little bit of Jason Momoa to go see.
Quite possibly, yep, quite. But I thought he was awful. I think the way he's characterization, oh yeah, and every time you look at him, you have that weird music that, and the way they did in Justice League, the Snyder cut.
Yeah.
Whenever you saw Gal Gadot, whenever you saw anything relating to Wonder Woman, you'd have the Wonder Woman Amazon music. So overused, it was like a parody.
Yep.
And it was just a parody of itself that was so overused. But Aquaman was just the same.
It was terrible. I can't believe that. I was shocked that film actually did so well. I will never understand that, and I
think you just explained it.
Yeah, I think if there was like people checking at the cinema, the demographic is going to be a lot of ladies going to go see Jason Momoa because I mean, fair enough, why not? I guess, but
do you want to cope with that? That's okay. Story. I've got my white wine.
Exactly. But yeah, so what else is there to say about Superman the movie? It's such a good film, but it spawns all these other rabbit trails because of everything that it's connected to.
Yeah. It's the start of everything, really, isn't it? I mean, when it comes down to it, it really is the start of everything.
This is true. We
are where we are now with a delay because of Superman.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. It's funny that Superman is definitely the movie is the origin point, and the consistent thing is also Richard Donner because he kind of starts it. Tim Burton goes crazy with Batman, still good movie. I like 1 and 2. The others are silly, but then when you get to 2000, Richard Donner is the producer of X-Men. And X-Men is very, very much in the same vein as Superman, and
verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude. That's it. We're going to ground it. We're going to make it. We're going to make it as realistic as possible. And so it's like without those two, without Superman 1, I suppose 2, but kind of more 1 and X-Men. We don't have what we have now. By any
Batman's always been a thing by itself, isn't it? Batman's always just been Batman.
Yes.
It's like it's completely independent thing of everything else. You can pop up now and again in things, but Batman's Batman.
Yeah. He's So there's really no worry there, but in terms of really bringing this stuff and making comics serious, I suppose. in quotes there, that it is really down to this movie. That's a terrific movie. I do love to go back and watch it, even though I don't really like Lois, and I think Gene Hackman as Lex is the portrayal of Lex that they chose. I thought is despite all that kind of stuff.
It's not Lex.
I still love going back and seeing it, and I would say Gene Hackman is by far better than Kevin Spacey. His Lex was so stupid in Superman Returns. I just really didn't like it. The other thing that bugged me about Superman Returns, and what I don't know what your take is on this, is Superman is set in the 70s. So it was late 70s, early 80s. So why is Superman Returns set in modern day?
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
Like,
I've never thought of that. You're absolutely right.
Because they're like, oh, it's meant to be a sequel. It's meant to take place after Superman 2. I'm like, okay, but there's cell phones and shit. So, and
they're flying this new futuristic space rocket that we don't even have now.
Right. the rocket that takes off of an airplane.
Yeah. It's burnt the airplane. Who thought that'd happen?
That was nonsense. But yeah, so that to me was weird. That was part of the missed opportunity. It's like, if you're really going to do a proper sequel and ignore Superman 2 and 3, which is interesting, or 3 and 4, which is interesting because Superman Returns really was, I think that I don't know how many other films prior to that had done that, where it's trying to be a new sequel.
Yeah.
While ignoring the rest of what came out.
Terminator, Dark Fate, and
yeah. So it's quite interesting that they tried to do that with that, but then it just never took off for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, no, Gene Hackman beats Kevin Spacey any day.
Every day of the week.
Cool. This is good stuff. I guess we've been talking for over 2 hours, but we have gone we have gone through everything, which is
there have been occasional tangents, Luke.
There have been a couple of tangents here and there, but it's good. It gives people an interesting 50,000 rabbit trails to go down with us.
Yeah.
I will just mention in the chat, Biffer mentioned ages ago that he was saying what his top 6 movies are of all time. So I'll read those out. So 1 is Sunset Boulevard, 2 is Old Boy, 3 is Spirited Away, 4 is RRR, 5 is Farewell, My Concubine, and 6 is Once Upon a Time in the West. I know maybe 2 of those.
I know a few of them, but I've never heard of RRR.
RRR is a brand new film. It's an Indian film, an Indian action film that has taken the world by storm. I don't know if it's on Netflix or it was on Netflix, but it was it was kind of one of those things where it generated a lot of excitement in and around the same time as Top Gun, of oh my gosh, this is we're getting back to really good action movies. So I have heard very good things about RRR.
And then they released Red Notice and proved us wrong.
Right. But one of these days I'll watch it. But there we go. Anyway, Tony, thanks for coming and hanging out with me tonight and chatting about your top 6 movies and books, and obviously telling us all about your sort of journey from being a barrister to becoming a thriller writer. Where can people find you outside of this?
Find me or find the books, or both?
Find you on social media and stuff like that.
I'm on Twitter. I'm on YouTube, but I haven't made anything for about a year and a half. I've got to get back to that. I'm on Twitter. I'm on YouTube. I am on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, and I'm also occasionally, when I remember it exists, on TikTok, but only about 4 times. On all of them, I am Tony Kent _writes. You can find Tony Kent _writes on all of them, or you can find my website just at tonykent.net. And in terms of books, you can find them in pretty much anywhere, any major bookstore.
There is a link to your books in the description of this episode, so you can. It's an Amazon link. So if you don't like Amazon, go find it yourself somewhere else. But the link is there. Highly recommend picking up Tony's books. Your latest book is No Way to Die.
No Way to Die came out in paperback earlier this year, hardback last year. I'm slightly behind on the next one, but it's almost done.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Anyway, I'll be back on Wednesday. I'm gonna do a 2022 in review, discuss some films and shows and the few books that I was able to read this year and what I
What
liked
time
and
is
what
that?
I didn't like. Say again.
What time?
Be Wednesday, 7:30. 7:30.
Okay. I
I
will
will
try
be
to make
doing.
sure I'm watching.
Yeah, I'll be doing that. That'll be fun. There's some interesting shows that have been watched this year that I think need a good discussion. But it'll be me rambling for about an hour or so. But yeah, so hopefully see some of you there, and Tony, hopefully have you back on in the sometime in the future. But
Yeah.
until then,
Say the word.
see you later,
Luke,
guys.
thank you very much. Take care.
No worries.